Okay, so good morning. For today's discussion, we'll have uh, Unit 2. Okay, talks about general audit principles and auditor's responsibility. Okay, so our focus for today is, of course, determining what will be the responsibilities of the auditor and their objective in auditing. And at the same time, we'll also deal with some issues on the size of the entity, how it affects the audit, and if you are continuing the audit, what will be the steps uh, and those characteristics, excuse me, with regards to judgment and skepticism. Okay. All right. So let's start off with like our discussion last week. We talked about assurance engagement. So remember, there are essential elements on essential elements on assurance engagement, and at the same time, we have to differentiate audit and review. Okay, and one particular point that I wish for you to remember is this. Okay, because these two definitely will be like a standard. Okay, of what you will do as an auditor in the future. So reasonable assurance is focusing on audit. Okay, limited assurance will be on review. And last time we also discussed about the difference between the two. Audit is regular, okay, like you're inspecting, interviewing, doing analysis, okay, of the financial statements, and determining whether that complies with accounting standards. Okay. In review, you will do the same, but limited in scope, limited in extent of audit, and limited in evidences that you're collecting. At the same time, also you don't have the same effort that you're doing in audit. That's the main difference. Okay, review is just a reduced audit, okay, a reduced effort and timing of audit. That's it. Okay, it's almost the same. All right. So most of our discussion will circle on this standard. So ISA 200 and then ISA 260. Sorry, ISA 265. Okay, that will be focusing on objectives of independent auditor. And at the same time, we will also touch code of ethics, which we also discussed last meeting. Okay, that will still be relevant on this discussion. Now, take note that ISA or International Standards of Auditing will be applicable to all entities, which means unlike with IFRS will have applicable to reporting entity and publicly listed companies, and then there is IFRS for SMEs. Here different. Okay, ISA will be applicable to all entities, whether that is a reporting entity or large company or uh, company trading in stock market or a medium-sized entity. But of course, the difference will be how much you will do in audit, because the steps that you're doing in big companies will of course different in small companies, right? Big companies you might require so much individuals to be involved, pay staff, audit staff, and then some supervisors to be there. But in small entity audit, you may have to reduce some of the steps that you're doing. Why? Because remember, the small and medium-sized entities, they don't have the resources to pay you. Okay? If you do all the steps, you will also consume your resources. Remember, you are the one running the audit firm. As we will assume that you are the audit partner. So in running your audit firm, that will involve costing, pay how much you can charge with your client. And small entities will not be willing to pay you so much. Okay, so which means there will be chances that yes, ISA will be applicable, but at the same time you may need to reduce some of the things that you're doing compared with big companies, okay, against small companies. Right? Clear? Okay, so in the future it's not automatic. Okay, you're auditing a trading store and then you're auditing a big shopping mall. Okay, yeah, they may have the same audit procedure, but small entities or small shops will have reduced number of steps that you will need to do. Clear? Okay, still working on business perspective. As as entity needs to be audited, but at the same time they don't want to spend so much. Okay, but that actually will have a bit of difference. Probably we'll discuss that in the next week's discussion, all about your audit response. Okay, sorry, audit risk response. Okay, so these are the issues on auditing SMEs. So as I mentioned, all audits are not planned and performed the same way. So which means you need to adjust. And then at the same time, work effort for SME may be a bit different from large entities, as previously mentioned. Okay. So these are some consideration on small entities. Okay, I'm not requiring you to remember all this. Okay, but what I'm trying to emphasize is again, you have to be mindful when you're auditing a big company and small entity. Okay, there might be some variation on your work. Okay, so these are the references. Okay, ISA 500 Appendix 19 or dot A19. Okay, there will be standard audit programs or checklists. Okay, that you need to drop in and create standard assumptions. ISA 315 dot A10 or Appendix 10. Plan and perform analytical procedures when an early draft is available. Audit evidence for control environment in SMEs may not be available. Okay, so it has to depend on management or owner manager functions. Okay. Now take note, and last time we discussed about this control environment. Okay, if you can remember control environment, that is the foundation of all the controls. That is the behavior, culture, customs, and the practices of the entity, which means in small entities, you will not have that separation of ownership and management. Small entities, the owner may be the manager also. So you don't have that kind of control comparing with big companies because the owner will hire someone to create board of directors. Okay, big companies. And board of directors will oversee operation of management. In small entities, they don't have that privilege. Because anyway, why should you hire another person to manage your business? You don't have that money, right? So which means the ownership and management might be same. So the control environment in SMEs may not be that really, let us say, emphasized. I'm not saying weak, okay? It's not may not be really emphasized because there is no distinction between owners and managers. Okay, so these are some SMEs. Okay, remember SMEs must still comply with ISA requirement, but not all. Okay, ISA will be applicable. So SME does not use a service organization, which means they may not be outsourcing some of their functions. SME auditing is continuing and not initial engagement. Okay. SME audit is not a group audit. It's small entity. They don't have subsidiaries. Okay, they don't own another company. If they own another company, that means that company is a big company, right? Okay. SME may not have internal audit function, which means they don't have that sort of monitoring of control. The last time that we discussed, where internal audit works as a monitoring, okay, of what the management is doing. They may not have that internal audit function because anyway they don't have the money to pay. Okay, unless you're throwing your money. Okay, you hire someone, pay, operate at a loss, huh? Working as charity. It will not work. You know, right? SME audit engagement is to report on general purpose financial statements, but take note as SME will follow IFRS for SMEs. Okay, clear? So that's a separate set of accounting standards that they need to follow. Some points that I want to emphasize: the form, content, and extent of documentation can vary with size and complexity. We expect that big companies will require lots of documents, supporting evidences, right? But small entities, they may not have that privilege of giving you so much evidences. And anyway, their operation is not that big. Okay, so you don't really expect huge number of documents that you will require from small entities. Okay, so that will vary from depending on the size and complexity. SME documentation is less extensive. because some of the processes in small entities is, let's say, shortened. Okay, so in big companies they may have level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in process, but in small entities maybe level 1, 2 only. So which means the documentation will be less extensive. They don't really require so much. Okay, sometimes they may just say, okay, no need to have those so much on. They will have delivery receipt, but in big companies they have another document that they're using. But in small entities they don't require that. So the documentation may not be that extensive or much. Okay? And SME documentation may be simple and relatively brief. That's true. Okay? As I mentioned to you, it's not bureaucratic. Small entities direct. Okay? Process here, execute the other side. Okay? Unlike in big companies, order, process, and then someone will review, approve, and then dispatch. So it's a longer process. Okay? Clear? Future auditors, take note of that. Huh? Okay, so let's focus on the main discussion here, overall objectives of an independent auditor. All right. So as any work, okay, around the business and around the world, we always have objectives. Okay, so objective is the one that you always have to refer to why you're doing something. Okay, for example, okay, why you're studying, huh? Just to waste money, nothing to do at home, so rather stay at the school. Of course, you have an objective, right? So objective is to what? See your crush. So what is your objective? You want to complete the degree, right? So by focusing on your objective, you will create your what? Plans for the day or plans for the year, right? And because you're clear with the objective, your plans will be directed to that objective, and then you will have to create steps to achieve that objective, right? Okay, so I want to finish my degree. Okay, I'll consult ChatGPT. No, no, no. Doing. So I want to finish my degree, so I have to attend classes, perform well in my revision tests and those non-accessible tests, so that I will be earning more information about the assessment, and then probably pass the or make my grades distinct or high distinction. Right? So clear. So even in audit, it will be like that. So the auditor must be clear on its objective. If you're not clear with the objective, definitely you will get lost during the audit. Okay, let's give an example. Last time I discussed about responsibilities. Okay, your responsibility as an auditor is to audit, right? Review the financial statements, supporting documents, and these things. It is not your work to prepare financial statements. Although you can assist. Take note that you can assist in preparing financial statement. Maybe there's an updated financial statement requirement. Now there is a new requirement. I forgot the exact number. IFRS 18. There is a different way of presenting financial statements next year. Okay. So if you have not been familiar with that, I'll give you an overview of what will be the financial statement in the future, next year. So your regular knowledge about financial or income statement is you have revenue, expense, correct, and then other comprehensive income, and then you have total OCI or other comprehensive income. Next year's presentation will be different. What you will do is you have three sections in financial statements. You have operating activities, just like cash flow, operating, investing, financing. You have to present it in that way. So you as an auditor must be familiar with, or requirement for you, it's a requirement for you to be familiar with accounting standards. Take note, it is not your responsibility to prepare financial statements. Clear? But because of your expertise, you can assist them in preparing. So you are not supposed to interfere how they prepare financial statements. Ask them to provide the data, give the template, give it to them, help them to prepare. But preparing it on their behalf is not your job. Clear? You always go back to your objectives. Okay? So let's look into the objective of the auditor. So this is the primary, and then this is the support. Okay? To obtain reasonable assurance about, and this is important slide. Okay, take note of this. This is really important. Okay, to obtain reasonable assurance about whether the financial statements as a whole are free from material misstatements. Take note of that wording. Free from material misstatement, whether due to fraud or error, thereby enabling the auditor to express an opinion whether financial statements are prepared in all material respects in accordance with applicable financial reporting framework. Okay, so that's the initial. Okay, that's the primary purpose. Okay, the supporting one is to report on the financial statements and communicate as required by ISAs in accordance with the auditor's findings. All right, so I'll discuss further on fraud and error later, but I want to focus on that materials free from material mistakes. Related to reasonable assurance, you cannot provide absolute assurance. Okay, there is no 100% assurance that can be provided by anyone, even if you are the one involved in the process. Sometimes you might miss one transaction out of 10,000 transactions, so you don't have absolute assurance. Okay, so in the same time, auditor can only do audit on material items. Now you studied this in your accounting, okay? Your favorite accounting, right? If it is not your favorite, I don't really know why you're still in this degree. Okay. The concept of materiality is where an item that can affect your decision making. Clear? Okay. How does it work? If you're running a restaurant and that toothpick, right? One toothpick is missing. Will you stop the operation and then try to find where the toothpick is? Answer me. Why? Because we think, or we will assume that one toothpick will not affect our decision making. Correct? Will that affect your decision making? No. Okay. But what if, for example, 10 big boxes of toothpicks, like maybe this big 10 those, will that at least within yourself will say, hey, wait, what's happening? Will that affect at least some of your thoughts on saying, hey, let's find it? Yes? Okay, same toothpick, but there will be huge number of toothpicks missing. So that can affect you. So the materiality concept will be two things, okay? One is depending on the quantity. We already discussed that, you see that toothpick, okay? Second one is this, quality. And most of the students who completed the degree, they forgot the quality of information, okay? And I don't blame you, because us lecturers also have to be blamed. Okay, we're teaching you about calculation numbers and these things, right? Quality of information or qualitative materiality is important. Okay, why? Because those are some, let us say, it doesn't have that monetary value, but it affects your decision making. For example, bribe. If someone giving bribe, even though, let us say, for multinational company, maybe someone gave a bribe of like 20,000 kina. Although if you compare that it's multi-billion kina amount against 20,000, 20,000 is really minimal, right? But will you, okay, as the one running the business, will say, wait, that's not right? Will you do that? Take note, we're not talking about the amount, we're talking about the action. Yes or no? You will leave the 20,000. Someone took the money and then gave it to maybe someone to facilitate doing business. It's not the amount, it's the quality of the action. Clear? Okay, so that will involve there also. Later we'll discuss about fraud and error. Okay? And take note, your opinion will be based on Of course, in Papua New Guinea, IFRS. Okay? And you have to communicate, which means you prepare your report based on your evidences that you collected, your opinion, okay, prepare the report, communicate it with those needed the report, okay? Those who hired you, actually. Legislation states that the one who will hire the auditor is the shareholder. So it means your report will be saying to the shareholders of ABC Limited, let's say. Clear? So where you will report? To the CEO. Take note, whoever hired you, and based on the Act, Companies Act, the one who will hire you will be the shareholders. Unless the shareholders, sorry, it's a first audit. Normally, first audit the directors. Okay, but after that engagement, shareholders will be the one to hire you or engage you. Okay, those are technicalities. Okay? I will not discuss those here. I already discussed this. Okay, just saying here. Okay, the reason why you have that reasonable assurance is there are inherent limitations in audit, and the auditor is persuasive rather than conclusive evidence. Persuasive means it's trying to convince you that this is the correct amount. Okay? If you say conclusive, you will try to find absolute evidence because conclusive means you have 100% proof that, okay, this is the one. Persuasive, on the other hand, is quite different. You will use materiality. You're not supposed to collect all the information. Okay? We will talk about that in evidence, by discussion on evidence. Okay, so this will be the next or the following discussion. You can refer to this one if you want to be clarified on this discussion. Okay, let's start off our discussion in my favorite discussion. Okay, amongst this slide, today's discussion: professional judgment and professional skepticism. Okay. So, how can we differentiate professional judgment and professional skepticism? You can see it in ISA 200.13, subsection K and I. Now, professional judgment is quite unique, okay, on every individual. Why? Because professional judgment will be coming from whatever you have been trained with, the knowledge that you have gained, any experiences that you made, even at times what you believe in. Oh, okay. Even at times, although standard is not saying, your beliefs or religion also affects your decision making. Okay? Really? Yeah. But we'll not deal with the religion. Okay? So many questions will come up. Okay? You might ask, hey, mister, you're talking about religion. Are you a pastor? Or I don't believe that I will be qualified as a pastor. Anyway, so in professional judgment, it will be affected by anything that mentioned here. Your education, training, knowledge that you gain, experience, whether work or personal, will affect your professional judgment. Okay, so like for example, let's say out of 10,000 transactions that you have audited, there is one error. Okay, we don't really, sorry, one misstatement. We don't really know if that's coming from error or fraud. Okay, but based on your experience, you may have encountered the similar type of that might be an exception. Which means if it is an exception, maybe there's a bit of lapse on the process, and that error or misstatement happened. So what you said, it's fine. That's exception. So they're having good control. Now, if you had experienced 10,000, again, coming back to that same example, 10,000 transactions, you audited 10,000, and then you found out one transaction with error. And based on your experience before, one transaction means that's an indication that there will be other misstatements. Then you will have what? Adjust your judgment. You will say, boss, I think we need to do more audit. Additional evidence has to be collected. Clear? So that's how you judge based on your experience. And even in training, okay, and in education, okay. If your lecturer here is imposing that, hey, 0.01 uh, uh, difference between debit and credit you find, what will happen during your audit and accounting profession? That 0.01 will what? Haunt you. You will say, oh my God, it's due dated. So we have to find that 0.01 difference. Clear? Am I clear on that? Okay, because we trained you to be like that. Okay, so your professional judgment will be affected by these different factors. Okay? Now, next discussion is professional skepticism. Now, professional skepticism is not doubting so much of your client. So every time the client will give you, auditor, this is the bank statement. Then you will look at the bank statement. I don't believe this bank statement. Give me another document. Okay? What will happen with your client? Client will be what? Annoyed. Hey, this bank statement is coming from the bank. It's not from us. Why you're doubting? Right? Professional skepticism is quite different. Okay? It's not suspecting your client that they're doing worse or bad on their company. Okay? It's only where you have that questioning mind, making sure that you're alert on any issues that might arise. Okay? If whether that's coming from fraud or error. Okay? Again, being alert on those issues, not doubting your client so much. If you doubt your client so much, they will feel it. And the next time they will say, we will end the engagement, so we will find another auditor. But I'm not saying be too friendly with your client. Last discussion I said about professional distance. Not too close, not too far. Okay, you can still mingle with your client. Maybe they invited you to uh, join them in party or golf course or corporate gathering and these things. That may be still applicable, but take note, if it is impairing your independence, you should avoid it. Okay? So, these are just samples of, this is important. This is an example of, okay, how skepticism works. Questioning mind, suspension of judgment. Sometimes, okay, let's say, for example, okay, uh, when you do the surprise cash count, okay, that's what they call it, surprise cash count. So what you will do as an auditor is, so you already engaged, you're already engaged as an auditor. You will visit the cashier and then ask them to count the money. You will stop what they're doing. Automatically, they need to count the money. That's how you do surprise cash count. So you as an auditor, you have a form that will be part of your evidence saying like 100 kina, okay, times 20, 50 kina times 10, like that, okay? Then 5 toya, okay, multiply by some, okay? 100 kina is missing. Will you say that the cashier stole the money? Hey, 100 kina is missing. I know that you have pocketed that one. Will you conclude like that? Professional skepticism is where you suspend that, okay, conclusion and then try to figure out, okay, might be that 100 kina drop, okay, under the cashier's table. Okay, 100 kina. Okay. I'm still doubtful about that. Anyway, so let us say by accident, 100 kina drop, okay, it's just down below the table. If you suspend your judgment and wait for the appropriate evidences before concluding, that is how professional skepticism works. Clear? Am I clear on that? Okay. For example, if your AI and plagiarism in your assignment is too high, I usually don't judge you. Not yet, because I have to collect enough evidence to say you may have cheated or used AI irresponsibly. Got it? Okay, so you may have seen my email. If you have high plagiarism, high similarities, I'm not saying plagiarism. Okay, anyone, I think there will be few students only will receive that email. I'm saying your assignment has high similarity. Kindly explain. Okay, because that is how professional skepticism works. You don't conclude, like, not yet. and collect enough evidences. Clear? Am I clear? Early morning, 8:30. All right. Search for knowledge, interpersonal understanding. When you say interpersonal understanding, sometimes you have to show that the staff that you're auditing is also human being. They may also be got tired, right? Maybe at one point you're doing the interview and then one of the staff saying, "Hey, don't talk to me." Maybe that person has some personal issue that he or she has to resolve. So don't say this staff is not cooperating with me. Okay? So you have to be mindful. Maybe that individual has that some issues. So then you say, okay, all right. So I'll leave you maybe for a minute. We'll try to discuss something when you're fine. Okay, clear? Future auditors. Then you will say, CEO, this staff are cooperating with me. I will say, okay, you have bad system. Not right. So how professional skepticism work? We always think about that person is also a human being. Okay, clear? What else? Autonomy, self-esteem. Okay. Now, this is a personal experience. Okay. When I first joined in audit, I was not yet a CPA. Okay. So actually, I was the uh, first employee that they accepted as part of audit team that is not a CPA. Okay. So that's what they said. I will never know the history. But anyway, so they said you're the first one we hired as an auditor, but not yet a CPA. Because normally what they will do is, if you're applying as an auditor with them, the first requirement is you must be a CPA. By chance and maybe some bold decisions, I applied for that, okay, even though I'm not a CPA. And because of that, I have like a low esteem because my colleagues are CPA, so they're going, they know what they're doing. I don't have experience. That's my first job. Okay, but along the way, you will have that. You will gain that self-esteem. Why? Because you are working with CPAs. You see how they work. You will get that experience. They will help you to because that's what they did to me. Okay, they really actually throw me to the to do some interview. I was shaking. The first time that I will do interview. But those experiences will increase your self-esteem. Okay, so when you're in audit, just take what they're asking you to do. Okay, as long as it will not damage or hurt you or kill you. Okay, they're saying to jump out of the cliff. You're doing it. No, don't do that. Okay, so if they're telling you to do something that you know that will increase your self-esteem, your confidence, do it. Okay. Hopefully, there will be so many great auditors in this batch. Okay. Okay. So this one you go through. Okay, I'll leave it to you. Okay. Let's go to the next important slide: planning and audit. Okay. Uh, Now I want you to take note of this important term. This is really important, huh? And from now on, you will hear what this particular phrase or term audit is. Okay. So from now on, you will hear that in my discussion: audit risk, audit risk, audit risk. So what is audit risk? Audit risk is a function of the risk of material misstatements in the financial statements and the risk that the auditor did not detect such misstatements. Okay. There's another definition of this. Later we'll discuss about it. Okay. But focus on that one. So the audit risk is based on whatever you will be based on your observation of financial statements. Okay. I'll ask you something. Okay. So you can provide your assessment. Okay. Let us say a company. Let's go back trade store. Okay, or retail shop. That retail shop receiving money, but not through cashier or the cash register, but manual receipt. There is no camera observing that staff receiving the money. And there is no regular physical count or stock take of the product that they're selling. At the same time, there is no security. Okay. Then there is no proper inventory management, which means they don't know when the product will be expired. And they don't know whether they already run out of a product. Okay. Now, I will ask you, okay, in your assessment, will this company provide, let us say, a statement of financial statements with material misstatements? I'm not saying fraud or error, material misstatements. What do you think? Will the inventory be undervalued or overvalued? Will the cash be missing? Might be missing? Yes, no. Okay, so that is your assessment now. When you assess that, you will say, we are not yet doing the audit, the collection of evidences. We're just understanding the business, and we obtain some interviews and these things. Based on our steps like that, we are assessing the risk, audit risk as high. When you provide your assessment on audit risk to be high, it means that there is problematic issues on the statements that might result to material misstatements. You got it, huh? So am I clear? So high audit risk means that there might be problem with the report and records. Low audit risk, on the other hand, is different. Why? Low audit risk means the controls are working well, the accounts are properly monitored, and these things. Okay, clear on the difference between high and low audit risk? Okay, because later we will do some further discussion on that. Now, to give you an example of an issue on receiving money, okay, manually. No, sorry. Forging a document, not receiving money, but related to cash. Okay. When I was when I first joined the academic, so which means that's my first year, okay, in teaching, I visited the computer shop. Okay. There, I was just trying to get internet access and then try to type something on these things. Then I found one of the students is asking someone, scan this, forge this, I want to collect money. Okay. So what they will do is that receipt will be given to their sponsor, and then sponsor will give the money. Okay. So the amount that this student is trying to collect is more than it's like 3 times supposed to pay to the school, okay, by forging the document. Okay. That's why I was telling, hey, you should not be engaging with this. Okay, you're helping the students to manipulate records, documents. Okay. Anyway, I don't know if that computer shop actually convinced. Okay, but what I told the student is it's not right. Okay? There's another story. Okay, just I've seen here. Okay, in the that deposit slip, deposit slip. There's amount here. Okay, it says okay. So you have to write, right? You have to write the amount. Okay. One deposit made is this. Intentionally, the 50 is written here. And then afterwards, when providing the receipt, so you can see when you deposited the money, there's like a confirmation down below. Okay. What this guy did, wrote another zeros then, other zeros. Now it becomes what? 5,000. Fortunately, the banks will have the statement here down below. There's a like forgot that print saying how much the money was deposited. Don't do this. deposit because we discovered that. So intentionally, the one the one showing that they paid is this. We can cross check it. Okay, how much the individual paid. Then add zero. Okay, becomes 5,000. Possible? Yes, possible, but we can always check. Sorry, you do that, we will catch you. Okay? So future auditors, that's how you cross check. Okay. Actually, we haven't gone to the bank statement because you can always check that with bank statement. Mm. Good auditor, teaching you some steps. I don't know if you're taking that. At least take some. I'm telling you. Okay. All right. So the auditor is concerned with material misstatements. The auditor needs to consider the risk of material misstatements at overall financial statements level. We call it management override. Maybe the management is the one trying to change the figure. Okay. Also, they need to be mindful about any increase of material statement on account balances and disclosure, and also at assertion level. By the way, I'll give you an overview. Assertion level, that is important in audit. Huh? Assertion is, of course, some of you may have known that is the representation. Representation of what? Whatever the management wants to say. If they say that they have cash of 1 million kina, that's assertion. They are trying to represent, okay, guys, we have 1 million kina. So what will you do as an auditor is to test the assertion. Whatever they are trying to include in the financial statement, you try to do your best to audit, maybe using samples, okay? Of course, you cannot really audit all the transactions. Huh? Another example, if the entity is saying we had engaged with 10 million kina worth of sale. So that is already an assertion, okay? Saying we actually did this, okay? We have 10 million kina worth of sales. So as an auditor, what you will do, check whether those, at least samples of that exist, okay? If they already have like 10 million kina worth of sales, right? We will just talk about this in the further discussion. Now, this is important. Components of audit risk, okay, or audit risk function. Take note of this. Okay, if you downloaded it in your Moodle, that's fine. Okay. What I would suggest is, of course, save it in your PDF, and maybe using your PDF, you can put a note. Okay, this is really important. Right. Inherent risk is a function of the nature of uncertainty surrounding some transaction account balances and disclosure. Also complex calculation and accounting estimate. In simpler term, even if you put control over it, the item itself is at risk. Best example, cash. Is cash always at risk? Risk of theft? Risk of misuse? Whatever control you put it there, cash itself is risky. At risk. Am I correct? Yes or no? If not, do you have money? Is it at risk every time? All the time? That's why individuals putting CCTV, you have the bank to put your money, and you have cash register to record the money. Clear? Okay. Another example, and this is quite or might happen during your audit. Sometimes there's a staff who has an absolute control of a transaction, which means he or she is the only one who knew the transaction or how the transaction works. Is that a natural risk or inherent risk? Yes. Why? This individual, if that individual has the absolute control of that transaction, can either overstate or misstate or understate that transaction, or maybe skip the transaction. I'll give an example. If an individual has the power to collect money at the same time record the money, how much the money collected, will that create a bit of a problem? Yes. Okay. So that situation creates risk. Okay. So that is related to control risk. Why? Because control risk is focusing on whether the company implemented proper control to reduce material misstatements. Example, if we are requiring the cashier to always encode the money that they receive in the machine, at the same time, there will be a supervisor who always check, not every time, but check maybe twice a day how much the money is inside the cashier, and then cross check how much they receive and these things. Is that a good control? Yes or no? On ensuring, take note, ensuring that the cash will not be missing. A machine accounting for the money. A supervisor will have a chance to count the money twice a day. Is that a good control? At least preventing things to happen. Yes. So the control is okay, right? Now, for example, if you are engaged in warehousing, okay, you have appliance inside the warehouse. Uh, you you didn't put any security. You don't have camera. You don't have any logs, okay, of how many items coming in and out. Is there a possibility that the items might be missing? Yes. So the control is at risk or high risk. Clear? If no one is watching me here during the session, I can do anything here. Huh? Is that high risk? Say yeah. Of course, no one is watching me, right? And even you're not giving feedback. You're not giving your comment about me. That creates high risk? Yes. But take note, it doesn't necessarily mean that something is really wrong. Take note na, this is risk. Only possibilities. So let's go back in the discussion. If there be inherent risk, high risk, like cash, and you don't put proper controls over cash, so inherent risk will be high, or there will be high the inherent risk. There will be high control risk, right? Am I correct? Yes. There's some money. Uh, Money is inherently always at risk, and the company didn't put control over it. They put 100,000 kina here. No one is watching. Okay, only us here. How many of us can we divide it? Oh, so which means no control, right? So there will be what we call high audit risk. Clear? Later we will do some games, so-called games. Now, detection risk is quite tricky because even in CPA classes this is confusing. Okay? Take note. Inherent risk, control risk will be focusing on the entity or our client. Detection risk is on your part, okay, as an auditor. Now, I'll ask you something. If the company has high inherent and control risk, which means we know that there might be possibilities of errors and mistake, right? And fraud. Okay? My question is, will it be easy for you to find some errors as an auditor? Will it be easy for you to find errors? Take note. We know that uh, there will be high inherent risk. We know and we conclude and we assess and we state that there is high control risk, which means there might be possibilities of high error, a high number of errors and frauds happening, right? Correct? Am I correct on that? My question is, by chance, will it be possible for you to catch any fraudulent error easily? No. So many errors already. You say, I cannot catch any errors. Again, lots of errors. Sorry. In your assessment, there are possible errors. Okay, lots of errors happening in the company. My question is, when you are now doing the actual audit, will it be easy for you to catch errors? So, Yes, because there are lots of errors, possible errors, right? If I do my audit now, my field work, there may be possibility that I can easily catch errors. Clear? See, I told you this is quite confusing. Because this one, take note, this two is on your client's side. This one is for you, auditor. If there will be high inherent risk, high control risk, as an auditor, will it be, I'm not saying actually easy, but in your assessment, will it be easy for you to possibly catch errors? Yes, because there will be plenty errors, possible plenty errors there, right? Now, if the accounts and transaction are at low risk, inherent risk, which means, that, for example, land, okay, land, can you just remove land and then move it in another place? Okay, so the existence of land is what? At low risk. Why? You just visit, you can see the land there, right? Unless you can leave or cut the land, carry it. Where is that land? Not possible, right? So the existence of land is at low risk. Am I correct? Okay. And then they put some fence, so ensure that it will be there and not it will be there, but at least protected. Okay. So land in existence will be at low risk, inherent risk, and of course control risk, as long as you have the document, right? So you kept, sorry, the client kept the document and it's there. Now, will the auditor will the auditor have that easy time to find error? No. Why? Because most likely there will be no error. Land is there. Okay, so the titles are also with them. Got it, huh? So there is, now we will go to that. And this is important. Huh? You can write this because this is really quite important. Huh? This. We will expand this in future discussion, but I want you to take note of this. Now remember what I told you a while ago. Audit risk will be high if uh, both control and inherent risk will be high. And as I mentioned, on your part as an auditor, it will be easy for you to find errors. So your detection risk will be low. So detection risk means if it is high, you will have difficulty to find errors. Detection risk low, it means that it's easy for you to find errors. Okay? So here, low. Okay, take note of this, we will expand this in the future. So if the audit risk is high, most likely, I'm not saying absolutely, but most likely inherent and control risks are both high, then detection risk will be low. Okay, if audit risk is low, then both inherent and control risk will be low, and then detection risk will be high. Okay, take note of that. That will be important, an important part of our discussion all throughout, or all till I think module 8. Okay, so we will use it till module 8. If you combine inherent and control risk, that will be what we call risk of material misstatements. Okay? Anyway, later you copy that. Okay, it will be important. Okay, let's go to the examples of factors that will or can increase inherent risk. Okay, There will be number of items here. I'll just emphasize few. Okay, one, increased competition. It's not because you failed to or the client failed to implement strong control. It's because the industry itself is competitive. That will increase the inherent risk. Uh, Bonus schemes based on profits. We are not saying that something is wrong, but there will be possibility, okay, that some abuse in power happening because there is a pressure for them to increase the profits. Okay. Unusual transaction near year end, okay, that also inherent risk. Okay. As an auditor, you have to be mindful of that. Okay. I'm just mentioning that. Okay. Another inherent factor that can increase inherent risk is key positions under staff, which means supposedly there should be a CFO, but no CFO was appointed, or staffed by inexperienced manager. They 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 selected chief information technology officer, but that person is not knowledgeable in technology. That creates inherent risk. Why? Because there will be possibilities that this guy is not competent to do the job. Okay, clear? Okay, example of control risk, limited segregation of duties. As I mentioned to you about a person collecting the money and at the same time recording the amount of money received during the day. Okay, so that's an example of control risk. I'm not saying this guy is pocketing the money. What I'm trying to say is there's a possibility. Okay, so what you will do again, remember as an auditor, find evidences. Okay, what else? Staff not taking regular leave. That's also possible. Why? Because they might be afraid of uh, if they took leave, someone will take over the transaction for them, and then they might discover some problems. Again, only possibility. So don't conclude yet. You have to get enough evidences. Okay. I have a good story about this. Okay. I think maybe some of the students have already heard this. Uh, when I was doing audit, there's an individual who uh, we'll talk about limited segregation of duties. There's an individual working in a publishing house, a Catholic publishing house. Their aim is to print magazines and send it to a Catholic school. Okay, simple. Okay, simple transaction. Print magazine provided to the Catholic school. Catholic school is not required to pay because that anyway that's part of the purpose of the organization. It's a non-profit organization. So this guy delivering the delivering the magazine and then collecting money, but the collection is not reported. Why? Because the publishing house is not requiring the Catholic school to pay. But anyway, this guy was collecting money. Through our efforts in discovering the problem, we concluded that there is possible fraud happening there. This guy is collecting money from the Catholic school. Clear? But take note, we cannot charge or provide a strong conclusion. Because as an auditor, you are not trained to find fraud. You are trained to identify indications that fraud is happening. Take note, because discovering fraud is work of the forensic auditors. That is not your job. Right? But because of your experience, you will be able to know that there might be fraud. Okay, so indication, indication. So this guy, we endorsed to the management saying, Father, okay, the priest, okay, running that one. We have a conclusion that there are high possibility that that is happening because of this. Okay, and this guy also bought a new car. Supposedly, a company which operates, sorry, an organization operates as non-profit organization, a staff supervisor have been able to buy a brand new car. Wait. The priests are using like an old van or bus. This guy new car. Eh? So is that indication that this guy is stealing money? But we cannot conclude. We can only provide that, and then management decide whether to investigate it further. Clear? But can we really say he's stealing money? Why? Do you have enough evidences? We don't really know where the money is coming, right? Remember, it's only indication. Now you're becoming, remember that judgment? Suspend your judgment and let them decide, okay? But along the way, they discover that it's true, okay? The management done their investigation, and this guy actually said, yes, I did stole money, okay, from the collection. Okay, of course, you will ask what happened to the story. What happened to the guy? This is Catholic priest run organization. What usually happen? Did they send this guy to jail? Huh? What the priest will say? Son, you're forgiven. No, this is true. They forgave this guy. What? Yes. You practice what you preach, yeah? Okay, so if they don't forgive, are they practicing? No, this is true story. They didn't charge the guy. They forgave, and they asked to return the money that they stole. That guy stole. There's another story about that company, but for the next discussion. Okay. Next major discussion is term of audit engagement. So I think we discussed about engagement letter last time. Okay. Engagement letter will include your agreement, responsibilities, scope of your work, and fee. Okay, that includes the fee. Right? So engagement letter confirm the auditor's acceptance. So which means if both of you, the client, representative, and you as an auditor sign that engagement letter, that is your contract. Okay, clear? Okay, so these are agreement that you must have with the management that they are responsible for preparing financial statements, internal control that they need to implement to ensure that there will be free from material statements. Okay, and then providing the auditor with necessary information and access, which means we require information from an individual or from the system, the management should not stop us. Clear, huh? But personal information that might be withheld for some time because it's personal information unless you can prove that you need that information. Okay? Might be you're asking for the number of the beautiful standard, so give it to you. Okay, take note of what we call preconditions. Preconditions are something that you need to discuss first within the management, and then both of you needs to agree. If they don't agree with the preconditions, most likely you will say no. We will not engage with you. Okay, so that must be resolved first before signing engagement letter. Again, engagement letter is the contract. Okay. So, sorry. Okay, anyway. So, content of engagement letter, I have shown to you this one last time, okay? Agreement on terms, objective and scope, responsibilities of the parties involved, what is the financial report framework. Now, in Papua New Guinea, we have IFRS, and then reference to the expected form and content of any reports. Okay. Will there be possibility that you will be the same auditor of the same company? Yes or no? Is it one-off engagement only, or it will be continuing? Most of the time, it will be continuing, right? Usually, it happens, right? Now, of course, what you did in initial year is you understood what company is, how it operates, right? Before you audit, you have to ask so many questions, like how you operate, what's the business model, who are the owners, who are your major suppliers and customers and competitors and these things. Okay, are you engaged in importation? All this you already have asked. Okay. Now for the next year audit, will you repeat the same questions? Most of the time, no. Why? Why you will repeat the same question? Will you repeat what is your business model? It's the same business model. They never, unless there is a huge change, right? Then you will ask question. Okay. Is this owned by this guy? If the ownership didn't change, then don't ask that question. Okay, it's the same. So don't repeat the question again and again and again. Only when, take note, there are significant changes in the client's operation and also different or a major difference in the engagement. Then you need to perform different approach. Ask questions that maybe you have asked 5 years ago, then you need to ask again. Okay? Clear? The assumptions that they had before, then they revise the assumptions or accounting assumptions, then we have to revise our question. You got it? Okay, so you need to do that in recurring audit. If there will be change in engagement, you need to send a new engagement letter. Okay? Which means probably change in circumstances affecting the need for a service. Maybe they ask for additional work. Then you have to revise the engagement letter. Okay? Misunderstanding of the nature. If the client is not really clear on the objectives of the audit, then you need to send new engagement letter. Restriction on scope of engagement. Probably there's an imposition made by management or there's a change in circumstance. Then you need to send another or a new set of engagement letter. Okay. All right. So this one is under Australian perspective. For Australia, they have the CLERP 9. Okay. And that is supported by Corporations Act. In US, they have this popular and internationally recognized legislation. When I say recognized, it means that it's like a reference. Okay. Reference Act. We call it Sarbanes-Oxley Act. It's really important because it's a good reference, not a law, but reference whenever you're testing about your work as an auditor and other services, okay, that you're doing. For example, if you're doing bookkeeping, will that affect your independence? If it is with the same company, then yes. If it is done in a different company, then okay. Which means you're still doing audit, but you're also doing bookkeeping in another company. Will that work well in your independence? Yes. Okay. Internal audit outsourcing, which is a really a prospering work by the external auditor. Now, if you are the external auditor of the company, you're not supposed to be internal auditor of that company too. Why? Because in internal audit is what? Most likely engaged with management and trying to help on improving the process. If you are auditing the same work, what will happen? That is self-review threat. Okay. Remember that those threats into independence. What else? Now in US, they are prohibiting the Act prohibits the employment of audit client. Take note, audit client or former audit team in the capacity of, which means if you are a former partner and then you want to be CEO of your client, in US it's not allowed. Why? Conflict of interest and self-review might happen. Clear? Okay. Controller, CFO, Chief Accounting Officer, and equivalent positions of this. But that is US. Take note that is US. It's only a reference for other jurisdictions. In Papua New Guinea, there's also same, okay? That is related to Code of Ethics of Professional Accountants. I think I mentioned about that 5-5-2 rule last time. Remember that 5-2? Okay, you can stay in the engagement for 5 years. Then you will be removed from that engagement. 2 years you can be a consultant. After that, you will be what? Removed totally for that same client for 1 year. Then you can come back. Clear? Will that create sort of like a control on or limiting that familiarity with the client? If you stay for 1 year, I would say that you will have at least one, two, three friends within the client's or staff of your client. Am I correct? Even when I think 1 month you will have friends. Okay. Am I correct on saying that? Now, if you spend 5 years, how familiar you will be with the client? Too familiar. Maybe your son or daughter is sorry, you ask the one of the staff there to be the godparent of your child, right? And then every Friday night you're going to Lamana, right? Huh? Noah on the other side, Cosmo. Okay, anyway. So that creates what familiarity, right? Am I correct? Now, if something goes wrong and you are too close with that individual, will you say negative things about your friend? No. Yes or no? Yes? Okay, no. Okay. And there might be possibility that it happens actually. Okay, one of our clients got engaged with one of the auditors. Okay, it happens. We are not saying it again. Remember, human beings. It can happen, right? So avoid things that will compromise your independence. And in US, it's really strict. They put it as part of their act or law. Okay? But in UK-based legislation, like in Australia and even here in Papua New Guinea, we don't have that strict rule. We use principle-based in our law, which means you use your common sense, you know that is wrong. Right? Use your common sense, that is right. That is principle-based. Rule-based is like this. They will list down everything. Okay? Clear? Okay, ISQC1, this is one of the most important standards that I want you to remember. Okay, especially in your assignment, you might require this. You might require this to be cited in your assignment. Okay, this is all about your audit firm. Okay, how you will maintain the quality control on your audit firm. It's important, of course, to maintain quality control because if your work is seen as quality, most likely clients will come to you and then ask to be audited. At first, imposing high quality work will cost you, definitely. Okay? But if you ensure high quality, most likely clients will come to you. That's the reason why this big four is profiting. KPMG, PwC, Deloitte, EY. Wait, you ask me how they made it? Because they set high quality, right? Quality control on their process. Okay? Did they establish it? I mean, if you are working in companies, will you say, we want to be audited by Deloitte, KPMG, PwC, and EY only? Because they set high standard. I'm not saying other audit firms doesn't have that, but because of their what? Their reputation, they already established that. But initially, they have that issues like it's too costly for us. Client doesn't want to go to us in these things. Okay? But eventually, they established their own. By the way, in practice, the higher the risk the audit client will be, that can affect what? The pricing of the audit fee. Why? It is natural because, take note, and I think we discussed this last meeting. If you take risky clients, the quality or your reputation will be what? Question. So if you're putting yourself in that position, you must have like what? Something to cover with that loss of reputation, right? How you will do that? Risky clients, sorry, so many risks that we're taking here. So, right? But it should not be the sole basis. It should not be the sole basis. What I'm trying to say is, uh, don't associate yourself with clients which reputation is already tainted, which means it's already like bad reputation. Okay? Why? Because your quality will be affected. Your reputation will be affected. And clients that your good clients will go out or will end your engagement. Why? They will say, we don't want to be associated with you. Right? Clear? So this is the 6 parts of the ISQC: leadership and responsibilities, relevant ethical requirements, acceptance and continuance of client relationship, human resources, engagement performance, and monitoring. Partly I discussed some of this last time. Okay? So if you can recall the discussion. Out of this slide, this is the most important. Okay? The engagement partner is required to take responsibility for the overall quality of an audit engagement. That is true. So which means if you are the audit engagement partner, you will take the responsibility of whatever your manager, supervisor, and staff is doing. So you have to design your work or your plan properly, or else whatever happens in the report, you cannot pinpoint staff A, staff B, staff B, they are actually wrong. No, because the court, if in case you will be sued, you will be the one to face the court and you will be sued, not your staff. Your staff will be called as a witness or something. That they will not be the one to be prosecuted. You will be the one to be in the court as audit engagement partner. So you have to be what? Mindful, diligent on preparing your plan. Clear? Yes? Or you will just leave it. Guys, you do it. I want to sip my coffee. I want to sit here. I want to relax. Please don't disturb me. Doesn't work like that, right? So what will be the key issues that you as an audit engagement partner will be facing, okay? Engagement team members' compliance with ethical requirements. So what you will do is you check whether your staff, manager, and supervisor will have any issues on conflict of interest. Competency also, you have to check if they are competent to do their work, right? You also have to determine whether you have enough competency as a team to audit. Okay? Sometimes we may have a client that we are not familiar with. So either try to check whether the other engagement team have that expertise. Maybe a staff had already worked in the banking industry, so you need some banking knowledge. You can hire that, so you can invite that person to be part of the audit engagement team, or hire an expert. Okay? But of course, the first choice that you will do is to take one within the audit firm. Because if you hire an expert, you need to pay more. Right? Is it true? Yes. You're also responsible for determining the acceptability and continuing of the relationship. Right? Assignment of engagement teams. So which means you can separate the teams and say, okay, engagement team A, you do this, audit the cash and any sales engagement. Engagement team B, you audit disbursement, payroll, and other expenses. Team C, you do the physical and properties. You do the audit. Okay, you're responsible in doing that. Engagement performance, consideration of the result of the firm's monitoring process, and review of audit working papers or working process. Now, I remember when I was in audit, I think that's the last slide that I will present today. When I was in audit, it's my first time, my first audit engagement. I was asked to audit a real estate developer, which means what they do in business is they bought a land and then build houses. That's the So my first experience is I'm too afraid of missing so much. So what I did, I collected as much documents and evidences as possible. Okay, hey, give me this, give me this, give me this. To the point that the paper actually stack up to this. All the evidences that I got is up to this. Then the supervisor said, okay, give me the working papers. Manager and audit partner will decide which paper will be retained and which paper will be disposed. So with this, it becomes only like this. Huh? Because the audit partner is the one to say this evidence is relevant to my conclusion, this is irrelevant. Okay? And so don't be afraid of collecting evidences, but you have to be mindful of course, of collecting so much. Okay? Consult with your supervisor and manager, they will tell you, okay, that might be irrelevant or that will be irrelevant. Okay? Based on your audit plan, which we will discuss on probably next meeting. All right. That's for today. We'll continue our discussion next meeting.